Hi, I'm Philip Bain, and you're listening to Best of Belfast.
Philip Bain, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
You are someone that has been on the list to interview for a very long time. And a quick little backstory for the people listening or the people indeed watching. You are someone that I've learned a lot from entrepreneurially as I've kind of grown into business over the last few years. I remember my first year of uni in particular and at several young enterprise events, which we'll talk about all the great work you do there. And you've taught me a lot of the nuts and bolts side to business. And I kind of look at you as like a classic entrepreneur who's really into problem solving, really into making an impact, but also sticking to the basics when it comes to business.
Sure.
And Young Enterprise has been massive in my own journey. The listeners know that, and you know that. Who taught you entrepreneurship? How did you get into all that? I assume it wasn't through Young Enterprise at school, but if it was, please correct me.
It wasn't through Young Enterprise. Actually, we didn't do Young Enterprise. I went to Inst. They may have changed that now, that they do a lot more entrepreneurial things, but back then it was very academic. Great school and all of the rest of it, and any Instonians who are listening, I love Inst.
Whoop, whoop.
But it's all good. I didn't play rugby, so I wasn't particularly popular in Inst, but no, they didn't do much on the entrepreneurial space in Inst. My learning regarding business, my experience in business really came from my father. My father was a chartered accountant, and he ran his own accountancy practice, and he became a partner at a very young age. We were talking about that just before the interview, that he wasn't in his 30s when he became a partner. He was actually 24.
Oh wow.
Because it was the time when you didn't have to do a degree. You did that apprenticeship thing, and you did your articles and whatever, and you worked in a practice and did your exams at night and all the rest of it. So he became a partner in the early 70s at the age of 24. And he built the practice up to, it was a kind of a medium-sized practice. And sometime in the early 80s, he was supposed to be, or his business partner was supposed to be meeting a client, and his business partner had got sick, and my father had a meeting with this guy who just thought he was brilliant. And this guy was a hotelier.
Okay.
And over the next 7 or 8 years, my father got involved in advising this guy and building up a whole big hotel empire, basically. And that kind of meant that come the late 80s, he sold his accountancy practice to Coopers and Lybrand, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers, was buying a lot of small, medium-sized practices at that time. He was a medium-sized practice, and as I understand it at the time, if you're small, you're fine. If you're large, you're fine. But if you're a middle-sized practice, you're probably better merging with someone or selling up. And so my father was getting so involved with this particular guy and his hotel business, which was in North America and in GB and in the south of Ireland and right across the province. He decided, well, I'll sell my accountancy practice and I'll go in full time with this guy and building up this hotel business. And I remember it really well because, I spent my 13th birthday in the penthouse suite of the Europa Hotel. We were going to hotels in America and London. It was amazing time. It was late 1980s. It was the whole kind of, Thatcher era and sort of free enterprise. And, I was wearing my fluorescent socks and my leather tie.
Oh, yeah.
Hawaiian shirt and all the rest of it. And, it was a really fun period of time. And everything was going great. My father was working crazy hours, but, that was fine. And we sort of felt it was only for a time. It was part of building up the business. We know the sacrifices now, what we have to make when we're building up a company. And we kind of got that at that time. But I remember very, very clearly one evening I was sitting at home, and some of your listeners who are a little bit older will remember this. I was sitting at home playing my Commodore 64, I don't know if anybody out there remembers the Commodore 64, but if you had a Commodore 64, there was two types of people in the world. There was those who had a Commodore 64 and those who had a Spectrum. And I was one of the ones who had a Commodore 64, and it took about 2 hours to load a computer game. Halfway through, the thing froze, and then you had to replay the tape again. It was a tape that actually played the computer games, which is so bizarre. You know, it is wild. And I think my Commodore 64 eventually melted or something. Something bizarre. But anyway, I was playing the Commodore 64, and my father was in business in North America looking after some of the hotels, and he hadn't been that well. He hadn't been great, and but we just thought he's under a lot of stress, under pressure, maybe a viral thing or whatever. But my mum came into my room, was playing my Commodore 64 as typically did on a Thursday night, and she came in and said, "I've got really, really bad news. Your father has just rang from a Salvation Army hospital, and he's been diagnosed with leukemia." And then my recollection is I knew then that he only had a few weeks to live.
Wow.
And so our whole life, which was going around these wonderful hotels, and we had a very idyllic life. We had a lovely big house in the country, and we had these fantastic holidays. We, you know, at a time when maybe not that many people were going to the States, we were going to the States quite frequently, and all the rest of it. We were having this fantastic life, and it just literally overnight, everything changed. And my father, he got back home and from the States, went to the Royal Victoria Hospital, and things were not good. He was receiving treatment, and the chemotherapy he was receiving was very, very aggressive treatment. It had, you know, the side effects of it were pretty brutal, and things were not good. And that was bad enough, but during that time, we then slipped into the early recession of the early 1990s, and that recession was not as bad as the more recent recession, but it was pretty bad. And we were, you know, there was job losses, there was problems, but also on top of that, we were also in the middle of the troubles. So we had the troubles, we had the recession, my father was just diagnosed with leukemia, and then something happened that really put our lights out, which was the main hotel that we had at that time, which was the Europa Hotel. It's now owned by the Hastings Group, but the Europa Hotel, it blew up. And typically what happens, as you would all know, when a hotel blows up, is the occupancy levels tend to nosedive.
Yeah, it's one way to put it.
And so the cash cow in marketing terms sort of literally exploded overnight. And added on to all of that, we also had a doubling of interest rates overnight. So interest rates now, what are they? 0.75%. Then they were maybe 7 or 8%. Overnight, they doubled to about 15%. So when you think about the pile that we're mounting up here, we've got doubling of interest rates on huge amount of loans against the growth of these hotels. We've got the cash cow blowing up. The main financial director got diagnosed with leukemia, and we're in the troubles. We're in the middle of a recession. It's just terrible. That's why I'm pretty relaxed about Brexit, I have to say, because if we were able to get through what we got through, I'm not that concerned about what comes ahead. But so that was all pretty horrendous, but quite, things were bad, as I say, in terms of my father's health, and it really didn't look good. It was all going one particular direction. But at that time, my father, he really believed, as my mother did as well, and the church that we were going to at that time also equally believed, that I really believe that he's going to be healed, he's going to get better. And within about a week or so of him really, really deteriorating, literally, to cut a long story short, the church prayed literally 24 hours. They got together and literally on the hour, they kind of set their alarm clock. So somebody woke up at 3 and started praying, somebody woke up at 4 and started praying. And they just prayed that he would be healed, and the elders came to the house and prayed with him. And within a week of that, he went back to hospital and he was in remission. He was healed.
Wow.
But he was healed, but he had no income, he had no job, because Emerald Group had just collapsed in the middle of all of this, because it obviously just couldn't sustain itself. With all the stuff that I just talked about, the business just completely and utterly floored. Was
Emerald Group the one that had the offices opposite Castle Court?
Castle Court, yeah.
Okay.
Those are the ones in Castle Court. And so if you come out of Castle Court, just facing you, if you lift your eyes up to the very top, you'll see a building at Spencer House, and my father's offices were there. And he came back into Spencer House, literally no job, no business, no nothing, no income, and this little kid who liked Commodore 64 games and needed to, and needed them. And and this literally what happened. He realized he needed to get an income. He needed to get a business. And he would have liked us also to get the shareholders back the money that they lost in the previous business venture. So what he did was he made a phone call to Pizza Hut UK.
Okay.
And he rang Pizza Hut, literally. It didn't get any more complicated than this. And he just said to them, look, I would love you to bring your Pizza Hut franchise to Northern Ireland, north and south. And I also want to buy the franchise. We're going to get a bunch of investors and shareholders together, and we're going to bring the franchise over to this part of the world. And the plan was to open up about 10 restaurants. Now, again, the context, we have the troubles, we have high interest rates, we have a recession, and we have a guy who has just finished his chemotherapy treatment with no hair and still quite fragile. But it was owned at that time by PepsiCo and Whitbread, and he brought the executives of PepsiCo and Pizza Hut to Northern Ireland. He was a bit of a joker, so as he was driving around Northern Ireland, showing them the potential sites, he said, now, be very, very careful, because at any moment now, we could have a terrorist coming out, and these sort of executives were sitting trembling in the back seat, wondering, what was going to happen. And I don't know how he did it, but he managed to convince them to convince them to sell the franchise to him and the shareholders and investors at that time. And he even got VC investment and everything at that time, which was unknown at that time. It was just unknown. And so come September 1991, we had the opening of the first Pizza Hut in Northern Ireland in Carryduff. It's no longer there now, but that was the first opening. So I've got a picture in my office of my father and his business partner, and Jerry Kelly, not Jerry Kelly, the Sinn Féin guy, Jerry Kelly, the radio personality, Jerry Kelly, opening up Pizza Hut Carryduff, and they opened up another 4 in the next 2 years.
Wow.
And also bought one in the Tallaght Centre in Dublin. And then in mid-1993, he passed away. The leukemia came back again, and he had about 6 weeks, and it was all gone. But in that period of time, I learned so much. There was about business and about entrepreneurship and about how to run a business. And because I didn't see my dad that much in the couple of years leading to him getting ill, I took a particular focus. And I think in the back of my mind, I knew this was only going to be for a short period of time. So I met him. I used to go up to his offices because I was an inst. I used to walk up to his office. We used to have breakfast together, and I used to just spend a lot of time just watching how he was with people. And just his whole approach to business. He used to always say, look, it's only money. And that kind of that phrase alone put everything in perspective too, because we can get so obsessed with it, and we can be so focused on it. But in the great scheme of things, a guy who knew that his life was only but for a time, and there was a fragility he saw. Obviously, there's a bigger picture there, and money isn't necessarily what it's all about. And I think, and he also used to say as well, he says, it's just too easy. This is just too easy. He always used to use that phrase, too easy. And again, that was part of his confidence and optimism about life in general. So he always had an optimism about people. He'd always an optimism that there was going to be a better day, but always realizing that in the midst of all the challenges that we face, it is at the end of the day only money. And so that's kind of not an ordinary childhood, I would suggest. But that was my entrepreneurial upbringing.
Yeah, I mean, and what an upbringing it was. Explains a lot. So then, how do you take that from dad passing away? Did you get into pizza? Did you leave pizza aside? How did you actually get your own feet into business?
I mean, I actually, funny enough, after my father passed away, I was quite shooting off in a lot of directions in a whole different, sort of probably wasn't a bit of a blur really for about a year. And I took a notion that I might want to do law, because my father had mentioned about law and how it could be quite interesting. I spent a week in a solicitor's office, and I quickly found out at the end of that, I think I left a day early. I think that says everything you need to know. I didn't have the discipline to read through a big lever arch file of a client's thing. I would probably be negligent within the first day of actually starting in practice. So I knew that law wasn't for me. I knew that business came very much into the fore after that. And I always kind of thought entrepreneurially, so did a business studies degree in Jordanstown, wasn't particularly academic up until that point. Still, I'm not academic, but I really got into it, and I saw it as my niche, and I did fairly well at the end of it all. I got a good degree, and I went out into the Northern Ireland market and I got a first class honours, and I fired my CV around a bunch of companies, and I thought, I'll have my pick because I've got a first class honours. It'll be great. I didn't get anything, which is a bit annoying. But I was the church that you and I both went to at that time.
Yeah, that's right. For the people listening, we only discovered this a few years ago.
Yeah.
When between the ages of I want to say maybe 5 and 12, it turned out that I went to the same church, and we only somehow accidentally discovered this because we didn't know each other.
That's right. Yeah. We learned a lot.
Small world, Northern Ireland.
Yeah. It was that 3-minute conversation before at a Young Enterprise Northern Ireland event that we learned a heck of a lot about each other within the space of 3 minutes. So there was a guy there, a fellow called Colin Crummy, and sadly he's no longer with us. But Colin and I really are so thankful to a number of men throughout my life who kind of reached out and became like a mentor. And it was a prayer of my mother's, actually, that in the absence of my father, that others would come into my life and be father figures, mentors, or whatever to me. And Colin was one of those people, and he kind of brought me into involvement in a Bible class, in leading a Bible class in church. But he also gave me a job.
Did he?
He gave me a job.
What did he do?
He ran a distribution company selling aerials and satellite. And that business still exists to this day. Very good business, and at that time they were looking for a graduate to help with marketing, and at that time they thought graduates were the best things since sliced white bread. I wasn't going to persuade him otherwise, or I wasn't going to dissuade him otherwise. He brought me in, and I spent a couple of years involved in a number of different projects and building the business at that time. Went to another company a couple of years after, or for a couple of years. It was a social enterprise that had set up a training company, and they wanted to grow that. And I found very quickly that the thing that I was good at, I was pretty rubbish at a lot of things. I had very little attention to detail. My attention span was about a second. There was a whole bunch of things. I was hopeless at finances. There was so much that I wasn't good at, but I was pretty good at throwing energy at things and growing stuff and communicating a message to the troops and to the market to grow the business. So that I kind of figured out fairly quickly on in my career. So I worked for CHC for a couple of years, that guy Colin, and then for a couple of years I worked for a company called Proteus, and then a couple of years after that I ended up being approached to run another social enterprise, which was a consultancy firm. And at that time there was a lot of peace and reconciliation money coming through. It was a consultant's dream as well as a community's, obviously benefited a lot from it. And it was a really, really good time to be in that space. And so I grew this consultancy practice, but it was a consultancy practice at the early stages of it. It was like a startup business at that time, and it was really struggling financially. So I was used to coming into environments, even at that stage, which, although I hadn't set up anything on my own, I was used to coming into businesses that were at either they were wanting to diversify and wanted me to diversify it, or like Proteus, where they had a spin-off business that they wanted, that was doing nothing and they wanted to grow, or the company I went to afterwards, where they had literally set up a startup business. It'd been it'd been sitting there for about 9 months, doing a little bit, not a lot, and I was going to go in there and bring that energy and grow it. And so that's kind of what I did. So I was learning how to start up companies and how to grow businesses, but I didn't have to spend any money doing it. They paid me to do it, and paid me to make a lot of mistakes during it as well, which I was so thankful for and learned a lot from. And then I felt at the time I'd been too much time had spent in the social economy. Not that the social economy isn't a fantastic sector, but I felt I needed to get my my hands dirty, if you like, in a more industrial space, private enterprise and all the rest of it. So I randomly just sent a CV one night just before Christmas to this company that had an operation that they had set up in Northern Ireland, an acquisition that they had made, and they said, I sent a CV, found myself in an interview in Dublin, went through a whole number of stages in the interview process, found myself as a general manager of quite a large company in Northern Ireland at the age of 28. And again, I didn't know what I was doing. But the beauty of that was that because I didn't know what I was doing, I had to delegate. I had to empower others. I had to promote people to certain positions that maybe had been passed over before in by previous managers. I had to do things because I didn't know what I was doing. So I tended to, by default, surround myself with really, really good people.
Yeah.
Because and that tended to work really, really well. So I didn't read about that. That's what I had to do. That's just what I had no other choice. And so built the business up, and we're getting closer to the ShredBank startup. But that's where I, that's kind of a snapshot of the career so far.
Okay, so ShredBank, great solution to a problem most businesses have.
Yeah,
it's that classic. You want to start a business? What problem are you going to solve?
Sure.
Right? What is that problem? Very, very, very quickly for the people listening.
Yeah. Problem basically is that information is extremely important. Everybody listening will know that. And there's a great importance in making sure that information is properly managed and properly retained. And also, if you want to get rid of it, is disposed in a legally and environmentally compliant way. And so any manager or business owner will not want that information to be found by third parties. They will not want that information getting lost. They will not want the potential financial implications of that, or fines that the Information Commission Office could impose on them. And those fines are very extensive, particularly in the GDPR world in which we live. And so that's
great for
which
you.
is great, yeah. So that's a problem. There's a risk associated with that. And as we all know in this room, entrepreneurship is really about risk management. It's about minimizing risk rather than even taking risks. It's about minimizing it. And
just to quickly jump in, I hate doing this, but I do just want to underline that, because that is actually one of the biggest things I've learned from you. Because I've heard you say multiple times in some of your keynotes that entrepreneurship is not about risk taking, it's about risk management. And totally. That was a massive mindset shift for me. Really.
I think it's a kind of one of those myths about entrepreneurship, that the entrepreneur is kind of some swashbuckling hero who just throws it on red every day and
dives off the cliff
and sticks his house and his pension and everything on the thing, and it might work and it may not work, and if it doesn't work, it's not really like that, because most people have got a brain, and they don't do that type of thing. What they do is there's a series of risks with everything in life, and their game is making sure they minimize it. And I remember, listening to a guy talk about Richard Branson and how on a lot of business initiatives that he was involved in, this particular guy was involved in a lot of them from a financial point of view. And he said a lot of what Richard Branson did was really about risk minimizing. He was de-risking a lot of times. And so, again, the perception would be risking at all at every stage. Actually, that wasn't happening. So so that there's a risk that exists in the marketplace, and it's about data protection, it's about security, it's about making sure we handle our information correctly and the personal information that we hold on behalf of others. And so ShredBank comes along and we eliminate that risk, because we shred confidential information on site using our mobile shredding trucks. And we make sure that when we leave, it's what I always say to people, when our truck leaves, that the information is destroyed. That information isn't rolling around in a van somewhere. It's completely gone. And you have peace of mind to know that risk that you have is eliminated. It's gone. And so that's what we sell, essentially.
Yeah. Something I didn't know about your own journey is a lot of your involvement in the social economy, as you described it. Okay.
Yeah.
Because something that I always found interesting about you, and somewhat curious, and this is from an outsider's perspective, is that you have this problem-solving, profit-making, great company, ShredBank.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that you have this real drive to still contribute socially.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, ShredBank is doing great things and it's solving problems, it's making business lives better.
Sure.
But is that the stuff that's going to be remembered? To kind of regurgitate what we were talking about maybe before the interview. Yeah. And it seems to be that there's this problem-solving side of you and this profit-making, and then there's also this legacy-building side to you.
Yeah, very much so. I think that... going back to what we were earlier saying, it's just money, and at the end of the day, if all you're doing, I mean, I do it because it's something that I want to do. I just feel that I want the business to be more than about money. I want there to be something. It has to mean something, and it's not. It is about, we, as you know, we're involved with the work of the Princess Trust, and we've raised money for them over many, many years. It's great work that the folks in the Princess Trust in Belfast do, an amazing work with young people, getting them into employment, education, and training. People who wouldn't have the opportunities that you or I had, and opportunities are provided for them. It's an amazing charity, and fantastically well run by Mark and the folks there. And Alzheimer's research, very close to my business partner's heart, because his father passed away. James, my business partner's father, passed away from Alzheimer's, and so we raise money for Alzheimer's on every 4 weeks, an event it's a free shredding event in Forsyth.
That's amazing.
And it started off with 2 people turning up to it, me and somebody else, and now, I mean, literally, and it's and I have no problem saying this figure. We're raising roughly about £500 a month. It's about 100 people turn up at that event every 4 weeks, getting their personal information shredded for free, and it's just a great initiative, and costs us nothing, contributes to Alzheimer's research, and helps the general public get rid of the personal information in a legally and environmentally compliant way. Sure. So it's all good. But
you've got the truck parked in Forsyth every single week.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so those types of things we do because it's close to our heart. We're passionate about it. We want the business to be more than just trading. But I think as well, secondary to that, I think the general public, the market, your suppliers, just right across the board, people want a business to be more than just making money, more than just trading. And I think for the long-term sustainability of any organization, it has to have an overarching driving purpose to, and it sounds a little bit whatever, but just to make the world a little bit better, And if an organization is just about making money and that's it, and it doesn't have any sense of wanting to make meaning and have a purpose and want to improve the lives of those who work for them and the community around them, and if you're big enough, even the world around you, then what is the point? Do you know what I mean? And so I believe that it's very important that that's a major plank in the activities that your business is involved in.
Have you ever had to make like a conscious decision between the two? So what I mean by that is you obviously give very generously and you invest a lot of your own time into writing books and raising money for the Princess Trust, doing entrepreneurial workshops and talks and everything like this. Is there a case to be made that actually, if that energy had been reinvested, you could have grown an even bigger, even better, more scale, ShredBank all over the place, ShredBank France, ShredBank Germany, like boom, 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 boom. Like, did you ever have to consciously make the decision, actually, I'm not going to scale to the extent and as fast as I perhaps could because I want to do this?
I think, it's a very good question. And you mentioned the word consciously. I think maybe at some level, I probably took the view that I don't overthink things, but I probably would be saying that I was conscious of the fact that if I'm going to do a lot of these things, there's going to have to be give somewhere else, and there's certain things I won't compromise on. But I was relaxed enough about compromising that there won't be a ShredBank France and there won't be a ShredBank Germany, simply because if I'm spending a lot of time doing X, Y, and Z, things that I want to do and I enjoy doing, and I do believe that they all were interconnected as well. I did them because I wanted to do it, and it's the right thing to do it. And me and my business partner, we've done a lot of things that we've done some good things, we've done things that haven't been successful, but it was the right thing to do. But it also had commercial benefit to it. I hate the notion of doing it for commercial benefit, and we didn't. But you can't also detach the reality that there was commercial win out of it. So if you're going around delivering talks like I did in 2010 on growing your business during a recession around enterprise agencies right across the province, it's the right thing to do and it's a good thing to do, but you're also inevitably going to get media exposure from that. So when we did a talk in Banbridge, Banbridge Enterprise Agency, the Banbridge Echo or whatever turned up and give us some free media on the back of that. And so we find that when we did stuff, you got publicity. And when you got publicity, that turned up in various sites on the internet. That helped your optimization. It all connected in together. So some people probably looked at times, goes, does that guy ever actually work? he just seems to be doing talks, and he seems to be doing stuff for the Princess Trust. You see his ugly looking mug on awards events and things like that. Does he know how to do a 9-to-5 job? But all of that was doing one. I loved doing it. I enjoyed doing it. It was good crack. A lot of those things were purposeful, and it was what James and I wanted to do, but also had commercial benefit as well. And I would say to people that when you're doing corporate social responsibility initiatives, put the commercial dimension into it, and don't be ashamed of it. Do it because it's the right thing, but make sure there's a commercial dimension to it too. And for no other reason that it will be sustainable if that's the case. If you do something corporate social responsibility and it's just a notional thing and there is no return at all in any shape or form for the organization, there's no publicity, there's no PR, there's no nothing, right? At some stage that's going to just die. So people are going to get bored of it. Staff are no longer going to commit to it anymore. The directors are going to just think, well, do we really want to do that again this year? And they're not going to probably raise that much money. But if they can see that there's great purpose in it, it's charity that's close to the people's hearts, so that's driving them. All the staff are involved in it and committed to it. Plus, it's a commercial benefit to the organisation. You're not going to commit to it for 1 or 2 years. You're going to commit to it like we've done with the likes of Princess Trust for 10 years, 15 years. And that's better for everybody. Yeah. It's better for us because we're seeing the charities that are close to our heart benefiting and doing well from the money we're resourcing. Our organisation is benefiting, their organisation is benefiting, everybody's doing well, everybody's winning, and when that's the case, the thing is sustainable. So that's kind of...
I do think this is now this is maybe my American influence of, living in the States for 3 years. There is this kind of Northern Irish thing where we're very, very fundamental on almost this idea you cannot do good and make money at the same time, right? Whereas in the States, they're like, oh yeah, we're all up for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And I think, it's sort of one or the other. You're absolutely right. And I did find that in the social economy sector. Now I'm talking 15 years ago. Yep. But back then, the social economy concept, people struggled with this idea that a community organisation should be sustainable, make profit, generate income, do partnerships with the private sector. It just seemed we're either a community organisation or a private business, but never the twain shall meet. You can't really do both. And I did some research for a master's in the way America does it.
Did you? I just didn't know that.
Yeah, and they do community development corporations, and they're big into venture philanthropy, and it's all about really the commercial and community coming together in a very strong partnership in order to generate a lot of money so that you can make big changes. So it's one guy once told me in the social economy sector, very, very successful social enterprises that they run in this part of the world. And I remember him saying to me, he says, get the business model right first. Get the thing making money as a social enterprise, as a community organization. Once you've got a sustainable, profitable organization that's generating cash, then you can change the world. But don't do it the other way around. Don't go and try and change the world skint, because you'll end up just burning out and you'll change nothing. Make them a lot of money, then you can give back. And we struggle with that in Northern Ireland. I get that. But 100%. In America, it makes all the sense in the world. We need to make a shed load of money so that we can do lots of really great things.
I thought you said a shred load of money. I was like, what a plug.
What a plug. I was close, but I thought it might be a wee bit too obvious. But yeah, I think we've got to get into that mindset. There's nothing wrong with making a lot of money, but it's what you do with it, and that's not just about community stuff. It's how you invest it in your business. And we would be big into making sure that our business operationally works. And I think from an entrepreneurial point of view, and I'm just speaking personally, so often we focus on the kind of the hot air stuff, the communicating the message, the marketing and all the rest of it, making all of these promises to the world, but you can't deliver on those promises unless you have this really slick operational administrative system back at the ranch. And that from entrepreneurs can be the boring element of it, but to me it is so fundamental, and I've learned that over the years. I've seen that as the boring thing. I don't really want, but I mean, we have such a fantastic team operationally and administratively in the organization, and it means that in a very simple terms, that those X amount of customers, they get a predictable service. They get that's all people want. Whatever you promise them, you deliver, and you deliver consistently.
Yeah,
that's all they want, and then they'll keep coming back to you. So when you don't do that, is when you lose them.
The series that we're doing is obviously focusing on leadership.
Yeah,
I know leadership is something that you're really
sure
passionate in. That's obviously why we're here.
Yeah.
For you, what is leadership? Is there a particular kind of thing you subscribe to? Is there a theory? Is there a model of leadership that you're interested in, or what's your general thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think, as we all know, there's thousands of books on it, and there's thousands of different definitions. And to me, I've seen leaderships in all shapes and forms, and I've seen extrovert leaders, I've seen introvert leaders, both very, very good. I've seen leaders who are very good operationally, and some leaders who are much better commercially. I've seen leaders who have got kind of a more entrepreneurial flavour, and I've seen leaders who are much more sort of behind the scenes and much more bureaucratic in their style. And so there's so many different types of leaders, and I kind of landed, I suppose, in a very simple definition that leadership is really, in my view, is creating an environment that enables goals to be achieved. It's as simple as that. Create an environment that enables goals to be achieved. That's what leaders do. Managers typically operate within the environment that they're given. Leaders will create an environment to enable whatever goals they are to achieve. And when you go with that definition, it kind of is quite an all-embracive one, because or all-inclusive one, because that means that leaders are not necessarily CEOs or FDs. Of course, that they would be leaders. But leadership can be found in all areas in the organization, and all different divisions and departments within any business. And so once you land on that, and particularly, great leaders try to identify future leaders. And sometimes we can look at, well, where's the charismatic person in the organization? Where's the extrovert? Because that's obviously the person who'll be the leader. But if you find somebody in the corner of an office creating their own little environment to enable goals to be achieved, then they're showing acts of leadership. They may not be extroverted, they may not be charismatic, but they are leaders, and leaders in the making. And so it's really important that we have a definition that really, to me, sums up what leadership is all about. And that environment, what do we mean by that? Well, you're creating an environment which, in my view, there's kind of 4 elements to it. There's infrastructure, there's the tables and chairs, there's the computer. It's your responsibility, not necessarily to plug the printer in, but it's your responsibility to make sure that the kit is fit for purpose in order to achieve the goals that you're looking for. It's no point setting up a shredding company if we didn't buy a mobile shredding truck, and a good one at that. So infrastructure is important.
Something that I just wanted to put out there, because I think it's so fascinating, the fact that you used firemen to drive the trucks. I thought that was just genius. That's it. I just wanted to throw it out there, because I felt like people needed to know. So good.
Exactly. And then after infrastructure, well, you're into people. You've got to put people in there, and you need to make sure that you're getting the right fit, as we all know, the right skill sets, the right experience, if experience is required. But to me, people, it's about character, because that's one thing I'm sure a lot of HR people listening will probably disagree with me, but I think what you get through that door is largely what you've got. You're not going to change them that much. Character is something that's kind of grilled in there. It's bedded in there. And it's really important at the recruitment stage to get people of good character. They believe in teamwork. They believe in working together. They're respectful. They've got passion and enthusiasm. They have a sense of ownership. They manage themselves. They motivate themselves. They have a sense that the organization is theirs. All of that type of stuff. Getting people with good character. And we've got really, really fantastic people come into our organization because we've recruited on character. So getting the right people, getting the right fit, getting the right skill sets in there, entrepreneurial types, operational types, administrative types, making sure you've got the right balance. And then once you've got the infrastructure, once you've got the people, then you've got to kind of organize them. And that's a leader's responsibility. And in a small organization, pretty flat structure, very straightforward, everybody reporting to one person. But organization, as well as making sure that there's good reporting structures in place. I think a big thing in leadership is accountability. We live in a world, I think, where accountability and challenge function just doesn't seem to exist. Yeah. And that seems to be diminishing. So it's really important from a leader's point of view to hold people to account, to challenge them, to encourage them, to build them up, to give them variety, to take them to the next level. So organization. And finally, if you get the infrastructure, people, and organization right, out pops a culture that everybody loves. And if you have a culture that everybody loves, and there's good accountability and challenge structures, and people are encouraged to develop to the next level, and future leaders are identified, and people are learning what leadership is all about, creating an environment that enable goals to be achieved, and everyone's aligned with those goals, you've got a fantastic organization. So leaders have a lot to do in making that happen. If they're caught up in the weeds and in the nitty gritty and the detail, then they're going to lose all of that. They need to be focused on, to me, creating an environment that enables goals to be achieved.
Born a leader versus becoming a leader.
Personally, I have no idea.
I appreciate the honesty, because people are like, well, you know, like, no.
I have no idea. I think it's probably a combination of both. I think all of us is a
So let me ask you this: what resources have helped you become a better leader?
I just think the experiences of life, to be honest with you. I think that, and I was talking about this to somebody the other night, and when you go through, and I've been through quite a lot of different things in business life and church life and family life and a whole lot of things, and I've had a lot of challenges and the different things that I've gone through. And there's two ways that you come out of it. One, that those experiences that you've gone through, good and bad, challenging, all the rest of it, you can put that in a little box and stick it up in the roof space, and it's there, it happened, but it's just, we're not quite dealing with that. We'll just leave that up in the roof space, quite frankly, and we'll just carry on as normal. Or you can allow those experiences to inform you, to mold you, to change you, to, as brutal as sometimes they may well be. And I think that leaders, and again, I failed on many, many fronts, but I think, as the question's been asked, I think leaders need to make sure that whatever experiences they go through, that it informs them, it changes them, it alters them, it brings them to be better people, to be better leaders, better communicators. And so you can read a lot, and that's good. You can listen to a lot of seminars, and that's good. And of course, podcasts are the best resource available. But I think you've got to allow that experience as you go through whatever it is to change you. And that will be seen by everybody. People just see it. You can't make it up. What you've gone through. So you can be quite positive of whatever experiences you go through, because it will be for your betterment.
Yeah. Feel free to take this question wherever you want to take it. Faith and leadership. And what I mean by that is, in the last, I'm 24, so I can't really speak too much. I was going to say in the last 20 odd years, there's been a real shift in the cultural narrative where faith and religion in the marketplace or in the secular world has kind of gone very inward. So before, people would have been very public, and now there is that real kind of separation between church and state, and people are afraid to speak out, and people are very much, this is the work me, and then I have the faith me, and then I do my church, and I do whatever. You're someone who blends it all together very seamlessly. How do you go about doing that? Why do you think it's important to do that? Any thoughts on just that whole kind of...
Yeah, I think the thing that's just in my mind is just, in all things, just be you, and try to be you, whether, you're sitting in an office with somebody, or you're doing a talk, or you're in a podcast. There should be consistency right through. Just be you, whatever that is, and whoever that is. And I think that, speaking personally, my faith is me, and I believe in the Lord, and I have a faith, and I follow Him, and as I've said often in this talk, and I can't stand listening to people who say about all of this seamless track record and everything's been wonderful, apart from that one thing that happened 10 years ago, but everything else was great. We've made many mistakes and many failings, and I've got many weaknesses, but I do believe very, very strongly in Christ, and I follow Him, and I believe that that is a day-to-day reality in my life, and that should just, for all of us, and it's a challenge to myself, but it should all just be seen in our conversation. It should be seen in our conduct. It should be seen in everything. And we shouldn't be, we live in a free society, so you really, we should have the freedom, and we should have, if you like, the boldness to be able to talk about the things that are important to us, whether that is your faith, or whether it is the sport that you follow, or whatever it is, because there is a sense in the world in which we live in. You talk about people are a bit nervous about talking about faith, but but others will very freely talk about, you know, their hobby or what they got up to in the weekend or whatever. And as they have the freedom to do that, we should also have the freedom to talk about our life and our faith and all the rest of it. So I think it's important that everyone gets comfortable with and relaxed about the fact that we are all very different. We all come from very different places. We've got different beliefs, and we should be able to share them and express them and not get too upset about what one another believes or thinks or whatever, because we do, I think, still live in a free society. And not to get too emotional about things. We're a serious place for getting emotional. You know, everybody, when it comes to religion and politics, you know, we'll kill each other on the back of it. You know what I mean? And I say that, you know, with seriousness and a heavy heart. We really need to get relaxed about talking about our own beliefs, our own faith. And if we're all relaxed about it, then, you know, we'll all be much more content about sharing.
Yeah.
You know.
Ever felt lonely as a leader? Is there a loneliness that comes with leadership?
Well, the thing about that is I'm an introvert, so I quite like being lonely. So I feel lonely quite a lot, but I enjoy it. That's the problem. I know that probably seems a bit of a contradiction because I would do talks and I'm all the rest of it.
Well, this is something that I'm constantly explaining to people.
Yeah.
Because I would say I'm an extroverted introvert.
Yeah.
It's fun at my core, you know, I am introverted, but I have no problem doing podcasts and doing,
exactly.
you know, all that sort of stuff.
And I'd be exactly the same, you know, so I would do a talk in public, but you know, you'd say, you know yourself, if you're doing a talk, you know, the beauty about that for an introvert is you don't have to talk to anybody. You know, you don't have to do any personal stuff. You're just sitting there on your own. It's an introvert's dream, to be honest with you. So I would tend to be quite antisocial, trying to be quite introverted. But I get the loneliness thing. I get that sense of when the world is coming in around you and you are going through really difficult things. And sometimes we face real complex challenges. And in your life and your life and everyone in this room, we can sometimes face very simple, very short-lived problems, but sometimes it's long and it's complex. And I've had a few of those. And sometimes we have that sense of loneliness. And that's why it's important going back to the mentor thing, where it is good. Somebody said one time it's good for any leader to both have a mentee and also to have a mentor. And I think there's a lot in that. You're bringing somebody along, but you're also you've got somebody who holds you to account, encourages you, helps you on your journey. Yeah. And I would have people that I would go to, would speak to. I wouldn't say go to from a mentor point of view, but they're people in my life. They're very close friends and family who advise, encourage, support, and tell me to wise up. That's my wife. My wife would be the one who tells me to wise up. No, but she would be, you know, she would be the greatest mentor. Yeah. So because we share everything and we talk about everything, and she behind the scenes would offer a lot of wise counsel. And so the loneliness thing, it can be a dangerous enough thing if you are a leader and you don't have anybody to go to. And I think that's something that leaders need to be careful about. They need to make sure that there are a core people around them that aren't always going to just pat them on the back and say everything's going to be fine. You've got also people who say, no, that's nonsense. That's rubbish. Don't do that. Again, I'm quoting my wife. So,
very good. So we always start to land the plane of the conversations just with a couple of stock questions. So these are questions we ask every single guest. Sure. It's interesting to see how different people react. The first one is...
why am I nervous?
Yeah. There's a reason these are at the end. The first one is a classic, difficult question for a Northern Irish person. Tell us about the most successful moment of your life, or a time where you felt incredibly successful.
A time I felt incredibly successful. I think I'll tell you one. This isn't the most successful one, but the one that comes into my head, I think, was around the time when I did a bit of a marathon of seminars, talks for the Princess Trust. And I remember it was around, I think, 2011, and things weren't good in the economy. And I took this notion of getting involved with the Princess Trust and raising money for them. and it was part of a program called the Million Makers program that was run by the Princess Trust. And the idea was you get 10 companies into a room and you get everybody really, really competitive. And the idea is that each company will raise about at least £10,000 in the space of 6 months by doing some sort of initiative. And I just got the old competitive juices just kept, where really are going. And I decided, well, look, the enterprise agencies maybe would benefit from me doing a talk on growing your business during recession, because I was growing my business during recession. And I love the Enterprise Agency Network. It's a fantastic organization. It's fantastic people. So I went around each one of them and said, would you be interested in me doing a talk for free, but you make a donation to the Princess Trust? And so for 6 months, I was just going around, I think about 30 organizations doing talks, morning, afternoon, night. And I was relatively young at the time, but I was exhausted at the end of it. But we raised £20,000 at the end of the whole thing. And I was exhausted, but I really felt that we had really accomplished something. We'd raised a lot of money. We'd done talks for, several thousand entrepreneurs right across the province at a time in which I suppose that talk would have been beneficial to a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. The Enterprise Agency got out of it. Princess Trust got out of it. We got the publicity out of it as well. And it was something that we all want to do. And I just felt at the end of it, that was actually good. I mean, I'm gonna think, I'm gonna take that.
Nice.
I'm gonna enjoy that.
As you should. Fair play. That's why we asked the question. I'm not a fan, even though I'm guilty of doing it, where we tend to downplay ourselves as part of the world. And I always like to try to encourage people to, don't be shy. The other side of that question is kind of flipping it on its head, and that is, tell us about either, again, the most challenging moment of your life or an incredibly challenging time, and how you were able to overcome it.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot, and probably time will be here to 3 o'clock in the morning if I think of a start. So the one I would link it in maybe with business, and the start of ShredBank is that, and it's an opportunity to bring my business partner into this as well. I was running a company at the age of 28, I was telling you about earlier on, and it was a time in my life, I wasn't doing anything differently, I don't think, but everything that I was doing was just falling apart in business. Everything was going wrong. I won't go into the details of it, but it was just crisis after crisis after crisis, calamity after calamity, and it just seemed as everything was going wrong. And for probably a bunch of reasons now, but I actually at that time, and how did I get out of that? Well, again, I'm just going to bring my faith into it. I prayed at that time that God would just bring me out of it, because something was really going wrong in business, and it was affecting me, and it was affecting family life. It was just affecting everything. And at that time, what was to be my now business partner, James, was also praying. He was running a family business, and he wanted to diversify because he felt that business was going but one particular direction, and he wanted to diversify. So he was praying. Now, he was a lifelong friend of mine, but I hadn't seen him in about 10 years. And then add on to that, his mum was praying that he would find somebody, and then my mum was praying that I would find somebody to go into business with. But none of us knew that we were praying this. And we were praying this, and then within a couple of weeks of those prayers, James and I bumped into each other first time in 10 years at a CF event, a missionary event. And we got talking, and then we grabbed a cup of coffee, and literally as we set the cups of coffee down, we decided to go into business together. And within 3 months, ShredBank was born and off and running.
So the partnership came before the idea, or did someone bring the idea?
No, that we had the idea then.
Nice.
It was actually I was running that business was a document management, document storage, document scanning, and you guessed it, document shredding business.
Nice.
And James had said, what about this shredding lark? And I was, and to be honest with you, if it had asked me to run a sweetie shop in Mongolia, I would have went and done it, because I needed to get out of that company. And so we got into business together, and within a few months we'd bought our first truck, and we were driving around a car park somewhere in this mobile shredding truck and getting all excited and giddy about the fact that we were going to, and probably looking back now, we thought, "Dear bless us, we were crazy." But something needed to happen, and I think when you do go through difficult, challenging times, there is always something that just needs to break. Something needs to change, and that happened, and so James and I have been in partnership now for 12 years, and to date, not one argument.
Hey, there you go.
Now he might say every day he's wanted to have an argument, but no, to date we've always, and it's because there's a mutual trust, respect, and we decided right from the very beginning, you look after operations or you look after sales, and I'll look after operations or I'll look after sales, and so we kind of have, if you like, that understanding. You do the ops, I'll do the sales, and that's worked out really, really well.
Nice.
And so so it's so far so good.
Great. Long may it continue. Long live the ShredBank.
Exactly.
If you take anyone from Northern Ireland out for coffee, we always throw in the caveat, dead or alive. Who would you take? Where would you take them, and why?
Anyone out for coffee in Northern Ireland? I tell you who I would take for coffee, and he's still alive. He no longer is in Northern Ireland, but he comes over to Northern Ireland. I would take him out for coffee. It's a guy that was quite a big influence in my life, and it's a fella called Les McKeown. And Les was quite a well-known entrepreneur and businessman in Northern Ireland. He was involved with the Pizza Hut franchise with my father, and he was actually, before Colin gave me that first break, Les actually he gave me my first break through give me a year's placement. During my degree, you had to find a placement company, and I worked for a very, very good company called Euroventure at that time. It's no longer around today, but I learned so much about business during that year in Euroventure, and Les taught me a lot about communication. He taught me a lot about marketing, taught me a lot about profile, taught me a lot about sort of confidence and playing to your strengths and all of that kind of stuff. And he's a very, very well-known guy, and I learned a lot from him, and I learned a lot from that company. There was a guy that I worked for directly in that company, a fella called Neil Stewart, and Neil was a great mentor to me, and I met with Neil sort of after that, maybe once or twice a year. We just met for dinner and lunch, and 7 years on from those meetings that, met him every year and just kept in touch with him. The reason that I got that big general manager job at the age of 28 was because he was one of my references, and the managing director of Dublin came down from Dublin, or came up from Dublin, isn't it? Came up from Dublin, and he met with Neil, and basically on the back of that, that reference, that chat that he had with Neil, I got the job. And so, if I'd take out to coffee, I would take out Les McKeown, and we would probably have to go to somewhere high level because he doesn't like cheap coffee. So we'd have to go to
Deans and Queens for a
latte. We'd have to go for Deans and Queens and a latte, and I would pay for it. And but I would really enjoy. He's a great conversationalist, and my son, he lives in Washington. Les lives in Washington now. Does public speaking and talks all around the States, and he's very well regarded consultant to many big organizations. Born and bred here, but my son had the opportunity when he was in Washington there just a couple of weeks ago to catch up with him for coffee. So he's a guy who would be very good in terms of the whole mentoring and coaching space and encouraging people in their journey. So
brilliant.
He's where I would take out for coffee.
Sounds good. Final question, Philip, and it's the question we always end on. If you could turn this recording studio into some sort of a time machine, go back to, let's say, an 18-year-old version of yourself, you had a couple of minutes of his time, what sort of stuff would you say to him?
I probably would tell him, it's kind of stumped me, would I tell him what's ahead of him, or would I let him find out for himself? I think one of the key things I would tell him, I think around relationships, I would probably tell him to make sure that you cultivate relationships, and you continue to you discipline yourself to maintain those relationships. I think a lot of people, maybe at my age and maybe a bit older than that, probably regret, and I would regret, relationships that were strong before, and it kind of just fizzled out. Not because we fell out, but just because the busyness of life, and we make a lot of excuses. And I think relationships I think, we do have to discipline ourselves. It sounds something unnatural about that, whether it's a guy that I met in 1999 and we got on really well and we were involved with business things together or whatever, I think you should try to maintain at some level, to some degree, the relationships that you have, because one, it's just the right thing to do, and I think it's I think I would tell Philip to do that. I've been good at it with some, but not that great with others. And funny enough, there was a guy who got into contact with me a few years ago, and I hadn't spoken to him maybe 6 or 7 years for no other reason than just paths hadn't crossed. But he was in some sort of radio interview, and he was prompted to think the same thing. And he said, because he got in contact with me, and I thought, what is this? I mean,
why are you talking
to me? And I thought he was ill or something. I thought there was something wrong, and I was coming to the meeting thinking he was going to tell me, could you look after my kids or something? I just didn't know what he was going to ask me, and he just says, no, I just wanted to, sort of reignite the relationship and the friendship. And an interesting thing out of it is that, and I genuinely don't believe this was the intent, but because of that coffee meeting, again, you go back to the business thing again, some business stuff came out of it, and we started doing some things together on the business space. And so, and that's not the reason you would do it, but that just happened to be what occurred from that meeting. So I would go back and I would say, look, just almost write down the relationships and make sure that you're on top of keeping in touch, not just with the 5, 6, or 7 that you're very, very close to, but make sure that you're in touch with people who have really helped you in the journey. And I'm thinking, I won't mention their name, I'm thinking of particular guys that really helped me in the early stage of my career, and it's just fizzled out, and I haven't. And that awkwardness, you kind of we've gone almost too far that we can't. So I would encourage that.
It's time for you to pay it forward then and do that. By the way, I'm healthy. Nothing's wrong with me. I just want a coffee. Promise.
That's right. Exactly. Got a whole bunch of people who are worried, thinking, why is Philip got in contact with us? But
so good. Well, Philip, thanks for your time. Really
thank you very much, Matt, for having me, and it was a good experience.
There you go.
Thank you very much.